You are watching the Neuro-Affirming Conversation Hour for outreach and support. The Humanities 101 Foundation welcomes you.
Hello, Nacho Nuts. Welcome back to another episode of Nachos, the Neuro-Affirming Conversation Hour for outreach and support. As always, I'm glad that you're here. So whether you're listening on a walk, in your car, between classes, or just taking a quiet moment for yourself, you made it here, and that matters. Because today, we're going to take a slightly different place. We're going to a slightly different place, a quieter place, a more reflective place. And I want to start with a quote that's been sitting with me a lot this past week, and honestly, over these past few weeks. So here's the quote. Every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies in the final sense a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and are not clothed. This world in arms is not spending money alone. It is spending the sweat of its laborers, the genius of its scientists, and the hopes of its children. We pay for a single fighter with 500,000 bushels of wheat. We pay for a single destroyer with new homes that could have housed more than 8,000 people. That is not a way of life at all in any true sense. Under the cloud of threatening war, it is a humanity hanging from a cross of iron. And those are the words of Dwight D. Eisenhower. So let that settle for a moment. Because when we hear the phrase, a nation at war, it's easy to imagine something distant, something happening somewhere else, some far off place, something that we observe secondhand, but we don't really quite feel. But here's what I've been sitting with this week, Nacho Nuts. What if being at war is not about what's happening only across the oceans, but what's happening within our own communities, within our own systems, our institutions, and sometimes within ourselves? What if war looks like burnout, like constant pressure, like feeling we have to fight just to be understood, just to belong, just to get through the day? And if that's true, then maybe this space right here becomes something different. Not a place of noise, but a place of noticing. Not a place of fighting, but a place of reconnecting. Because in true Nachos fashion, we're not here to overwhelm ourselves with everything that is broken. We're here to gently explore what it means to move towards something better, towards predictability, towards balance, towards joy. So today, we're going to spend some time sitting with that idea of what it means to live in a world that can feel like it's at war and literally be at war, and how we, in small and meaningful ways, can choose something different. And as we sit with that idea of being a world, not just a nation at war, I want to gently widen the lens for a moment. Because one of the things that the humanities teaches us is that this feeling is not new. Across time and across cultures, societies have wrestled with these same tensions and these same problems. Ancient Greece gave us stories like the Iliad, not just about glory, but also about grief and loss and the cost of human conflict. The Roman Empire expanded through great strength, but constantly struggled with what it meant to hold power together. Even in more recent history, during moments like the Cold War, there was always this dual reality, public strength on the outside and quiet anxiety underneath. And alongside all of this, there's always been another thread. Artists, writers, philosophers, everyday people asking softer questions. What does it mean to live well? What does it mean to belong? What does it mean to be human in a world that feels like it is constantly pushing, demanding, and dividing? And this is where I want to bring us gently into our own lived experience. Because for many neurodivergent people, that sense of tension of friction, of being at war with the environment around us. It's not just historical, it's daily. It can show up in the expectation to mask, in the systems that reward speed over thoughtfulness, in environments that value sameness over difference. And over time, that can begin to feel like a kind of internalized conflict, where the question is no longer, how do I navigate the world, but how much of myself do I have to change in order to survive it? And I want to say this clearly and with maximum care. If you've ever felt this way, and I have, it's not because something is wrong with you. It's because you're navigating a culture that was not fully designed with you in mind. And when we step back and look at that through a historical lens, we begin to see something important. We see that cultures are not fixed. They evolve, they shift, they expand when people begin to ask different questions. And maybe, just maybe, part of what we're doing here together, here in this space, is practicing a different way of being. Not one rooted in conflict, but one rooted in understanding, one rooted in care, in making room. And this is where I want to bring in something gently that we can talk about here on Nachos often. We talk about the PB&J principle: predictability, balance, and joy. My idea and my theories around micro accommodations, that they have these three things: predictability, balance, and joy. Because if a culture at war feels like unpredictability, like constant tension, like never knowing quite where you stand, then predictability becomes something powerful. And this isn't rigidity. This isn't control. This is a sense of grounding, a sense of knowing what to expect, of having rhythms, routines, and spaces that feel safe enough to simply be. And if a culture at war feels like everything is urgent, everything is high stakes, everything is too much all the time, then balance becomes an act of resistance, a gentle refusal to live in the constant overwhelm, a gentle reminder that rest is not something that we earn, it's something that we need. And if a culture at war can feel heavy, disconnected, transactional even, then joy becomes something deeply meaningful. And this isn't the loud performative kind, but the quiet kind of joy, the human joy. The moment you feel understood, the moment you feel you don't have to mask, the moment where even briefly things feel okay. And for many neurodivergent people, these are not small things. They're essential. They're the difference between surviving a system and actually being able to live within it. And so maybe as we move through today's episode, we're not trying to solve something as big as the world at war. Maybe what we're doing is something both smaller and more powerful. We're noticing where we can create predictability. We are protecting our moments of balance. And we're allowing ourselves, without guilt, without shame, to experience joy, even here, even now. And sometimes, nacho nuts, these ideas don't just live in history or theory. They show up in very, very real moments. And very real and immediate moments in our own lives. Moments we didn't plan for. Moments that interrupt our sense of predictability, or moments that test our balance. Moments where joy feels very, very far away. And I had one of those moments this week. That's why I'm laughing. I mentioned last week that I had gone to visit my mom, and I was making my way back on Tuesday, and I got a notification in my truck telling me to check the engine oil, add engine oil. So this is simple enough, right? So I pull over, I pop the hood, and I go to take a look. And in the process, I splash a little bit of the oil, and that splash unexpectedly catches fire. Not a big fire, but enough. Enough to get my attention. Enough to get a fire truck on its way. Enough to feel that surge in your body. Enough to feel that shift in everything in an instant. And in that moment, there's a quick choice that happens very quickly. Panic or presence. Usually, I might choose the panic. But in this instance, I closed the hood. I called 911. And because there wasn't much oxygen getting to it, the fire went out. And pretty much as quickly as it started, it was over. But what stayed with me wasn't just the event itself. It was everything that came after. Because moments like that, especially for those of us who are neurodivergent, can turn into something bigger internally. The replaying, the self-questioning, the what did I do wrong? The feeling of, especially the feeling of, I should have known better. And I could feel that starting, that pull towards self-judgment, towards shame, that familiar internal tension, the internal war, if you will, we were just talking about. But this time, I tried something different. I paused and I asked myself, not what did I mess up, but what did I learn here? While still offering myself some care. And that's where PB&J came back in. Predictability. Okay. So what happened step by step? No exaggeration, no spiraling, just the facts. Balance. Yes, something went wrong, and I handled it because I stayed present, I made the call, and I got through it. Both things can be true at the same time. And joy, and this one surprised me a little, joy showed up not so much as happiness, but as relief. Relief that I was okay. Relief that it wasn't worse. Relief that the fire chief had said I did the right thing by not just standing there and watching it burn, but by shutting the hood and calling them. Relief that I had the capacity in that moment to respond rather than shut down. And maybe even a quiet kind of personal pride there. Not perfection, not getting everything right, but being able to move through something unexpected without abandoning myself in the process. And that, Nacho Knots, is not a small thing. That's what it can look like to move from a place of internal conflict towards a place of understanding. And as I sat with that experience later, I realized something. It wasn't about a truck. It wasn't just about a small fire. It was about how quickly things can shift and how we respond when they do. So I want to gently turn this back to you, Nacho Knots, because I have a feeling this kind of moment might feel familiar. Not the exact situation of catching your car on fire, but the feeling of it, the unexpected disruption. That moment where something goes sideways, that split second where your body reacts and your mind starts trying to make sense of it. And here's the part that almost feels a little funny now, in hindsight, anyway. When everything's settled, when the hood was open and the wires were checked and traced, it turned out to be one spark plug wire. One small, worn out of place connection. $300 to fix. Not nothing, of course, but not the catastrophe that my body had braced for in that moment. Not a total loss where the insurance doesn't cover it. not the worst case scenario that rushed in so quickly, so loudly, and so persistently. And there's something really human in that, isn't there? Because in that moment, our nervous systems don't always scale the problem accurately. They respond to the possibility of danger, not just the reality of it. They prepare us for the fire, even if what we're actually dealing with is a loose wire, spilled oil, a simple mistake. And it doesn't make you dramatic. It doesn't make you too much. It means your system is doing its job, which is trying to protect you. But here's the quiet reframe that stayed with me. Even if that reaction felt big, the responses were grounded. I didn't disappear. I didn't abandon myself. I stayed with it long enough to find out what was actually wrong. And when we zoom out, that becomes the lesson. Sometimes the thing that feels like everything falling apart is actually something specific, something fixable, something contained. But we only learn that if we stay long enough to see it through. So maybe the takeaway isn't that we should never react strongly. Maybe it's that we can trust ourselves to move through the reaction, to gather information, to ask for help, to take the next right step. Because the goal isn't to become someone who never feels the surge of panic or overwhelm. The goal is to become someone who can say gently and honestly, okay, something's wrong. Let's find out what it actually is. And sometimes it's just a spark plug wire. So here's the invitation for this week. Take a few minutes when you're ready and reflect on a moment in your own life where something unexpected happened. Doesn't have to be dramatic. In fact, sometimes the smaller moments are the most meaningful. And as you reflect, you might gently walk yourself through a few prompts. What happened? Just the facts, no judgment. Don't get all editorial on yourself. No storytelling, you don't have to. Just what occurred. And what did I feel in my body and my mind in that moment? Was it stress, confusion, urgency, shutdown, something else? And what story did I start telling myself afterwards? Blame, frustration, embarrassment, numbness? And then, and maybe in your heart, in your mind, you don't have to do this in public. How might you bring PB&J into that moment? Where could predictability help you understand what actually happened? Where could balance have helped you hold both what went wrong and what went right? And where might there have been even the smallest moment of joy or relief or care in that situation? And if it helps, here are a few examples just to get your wheels turning. Maybe it was a moment where you sent an email to the wrong person and felt that immediate drop in your stomach. But later you realized you handled it, you corrected it, and the world didn't end. You didn't get fired. Maybe it was that social interaction that didn't go the way that you expected, and your mind replayed it over and over all night for weeks. But with a little distance, you could see that you showed up as yourself, and that's what mattered. Or maybe it was sensory overwhelm in a crowded space, and you had to step away. And in the past, you might have felt like that was failure, but now maybe it's reframed as awareness, as care, as knowing what you need. Or, like me, it was a moment where something small turned into something unexpected, but you got through it. Not perfectly, but fully. And if you feel comfortable, I'd love for you to share those moments. Drop them in the comments, send a message, bring them into your community spaces, leave a comment wherever you're listening or watching. Because one of the most powerful things we can do is to remind each other that we're not alone in these experiences. That these moments these disruptions, these reflections, they're all a part of what it means to be human and a part of what it means to learn how to care for ourselves within the world that we inhabit. So wherever you're listening or watching, whether it's in the chat, in the comments, in the space where this episode lives, you're welcome to bring your reflection there. Not that it has to be perfectly worded, not that it has to be profound, only that it has to be about naming the moments, the power in naming the moments and allowing those moments to be seen. And just as importantly, when you share, you're not only reflecting for yourself, you're helping someone else recognize their own experience too. Because one of the most meaningful things we can do, Nacho Knots, is gently remind each other we're not the only ones navigating this world. And as we hold space for those reflections, and as you take time this week to notice your own moments of disruption, of response, or of care, I also want to take just a few moments to gently connect this back to our course. Because in many ways, the work that you're doing in this class is very similar. It's about noticing, about reflecting, about making meaning from your experiences and the ideas that we explore together. So as you move towards your final project, this is really the time to stay connected to your course text, to spend time with the readings, to let those ideas sit with you the same way that we're practicing here, not rushing through them, but engaging with them. And if questions come up, and I'm sure that they will, I want to encourage you to send those my way. Whether it's something you're unsure about in the readings, something you're thinking about for your final projects, or just a connection you're starting to make, please feel free to reach out. You can email me, message me, or bring those questions into the spaces where we're interacting. Because just like we talked about earlier, you don't have to navigate this alone. And sometimes asking the question is the very thing that brings a little more predictability, a little more balance, and even a little bit of ease into the process. So before we begin to close out for today, I also want to take a moment to look ahead because April is right around the corner. And with that comes a number of really meaningful opportunities for connection, learning, and advocacy as we move through Autism Awareness Month. We have several events coming up that I'd love for you to be a part of if you're able. On April 14th, I'll be giving a keynote at the Beautiful Minds Conference at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. It's going to be a really special place bringing together stories, strategies, and shared experiences around neurodiversity, inclusion, and what it means to build environments where people can truly thrive. And then the next day on April 15th, we have Voices in Action in partnership with Self Advocates of Michigan at the Lansing State Capitol. And that's a powerful opportunity to engage directly in advocacy, to show up, to be heard, and to be part of shaping systems in ways that reflect lived experience and real community needs. And I want to say this clearly, however you choose to engage, whether you attend, share, listen, or simply hold space for all of these efforts, it all matters. And if you're looking for simple ways to support the work, you can follow, share, like content that we're putting out. That helps these messages reach people who may need them. And if you're in a position where you're able to, donations are always appreciated as well, and they directly support the work that we're doing to build more inclusive, neuro-affirming spaces. But most importantly, just being here, being a part of this community, that's already something meaningful, something important. And as we begin to come together towards the close of today's episode, I want to take a moment to reflect on where we've been. We started in that pensive place with that Eisenhower quote, sitting with the idea of what it means to live in a world and in a culture that feels and is at war. Not just in the ways we see in history books, but in the quieter everyday ways, through pressure, disconnection, and the feeling of having to push just to get through it all. And from there, we widened the lens. We looked at how this isn't new, how across history and across cultures, people have always wrestled with these tensions while also searching for something softer, something more human. Then we brought it closer to lived experience, to neurodivergence, to the very real ways that many of us navigate environments that weren't fully designed with us in mind, and how that can sometimes feel like an internal kind of conflict. And from that place, we grounded ourselves in good old PB&J, predictability, balance, and joy. Not as abstract ideas, but as practical, compassionate ways of moving through moments that feel overwhelming or unexpected. We explored that through a real moment, a small, unexpected event that could have easily turned into stress, self-judgment, or spiraling, but instead became an opportunity to pause, to reflect, to learn, and to respond with a little more care. And then we turn that outward, inviting you to reflect on your own moments, to notice where things have gone sideways, and to gently ask what it might look like to meet those moments with understanding instead of judgment. Because at the end of the day, this whole game isn't about solving everything. It's about shifting how we relate to what happens. It's about creating small pockets of predictability, protecting moments of balance, and allowing ourselves, even in a complicated and very confusing world, to experience a little bit of joy. And with all that in mind, with everything we've explored today, the reflection, the story, the moments of disruption and care, it brings us to a simple question. What are our affirmations? What are the things that can help support us in moving towards these goals? Towards a little more predictability, a little more balance, and a little more joy, especially when things don't go as planned. So let's take a few moments together and sit with a few of those. So I invite you to take these at your own pace. You don't have to force them to feel true right away. Just sit with them. Let them sit with you and take what resonates. I can pause and respond even when things feel unexpected. This connects back to those moments where everything shifts quickly. You may not control what happens, but you can create a small space between the moment and your response. And in that space, what I call the FU Beth moment, there is care. I'm allowed to learn without turning against myself. Mistakes, disruptions, accidents, car fires, they all happen. This affirmation reminds us all that growth doesn't require self-judgment. We can reflect and still be on our own sides. I can hold what went wrong and what went right at the same time. That's balance. It wasn't perfect, and you still handled it. You still did something. Both truths belong. My need for predictability is valid, and I can gently create it where I can. Whether that's routines, checklists, or simply understanding what happens step by step. Predictability is not weakness. It is support. Moments of relief, safety, and small wins count as joy. Joy doesn't have to be big or loud or grandiose. Sometimes it's just simply the fire going out. Sometimes it's the deep breath of relief afterwards. Sometimes it's simply, I'm okay. I don't have to navigate these moments alone. Let that one sink in. I don't have to navigate these moments alone. Whether it's reaching out, sharing in a community like this, or just hearing someone else's story, connection softens all of our experiences. I can move through disruption without abandoning myself. And this is really the heart of today. Things will happen, but you can stay with yourself through them with care, with patience, and with understanding. So as we begin to close for today, Nacho Knots, I want to gently remind you, you're allowed to move through the world at your own pace. Even in a culture that can feel loud, fast, and demanding, you're allowed to create moments of predictability, to protect your balance, and to notice those small, meaningful moments of joy when they appear. Nothing we talked about today requires perfection. It simply invites awareness and a little more care for yourself along the way. So as you head into the rest of your day, your evening, your week, your month, carry that with you. One small pause, one moment of balance, one quiet recognition that you are still here, still learning, and still growing. And as always, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and remember, even in a world that can feel like it's at war, there's still a space to choose peace within yourself.
Thank you for joining us. See you next week. The views and opinions expressed in this video are solely those of the creator and do not reflect the views of any institution, employer, or affiliated organization.